I'm going to start this video off with a little intro of my journey into Open Baffle. Started with, like maybe many people, when you do regular box kits and box speakers, at least I found out pretty quick that the carpentry part of it was the hard part for me, and not having the tools, not having the knowledge base, that I definitely saw that was taking most of the time and most of my focus and effort. So my logic was, well, maybe Open Baffle will be easier just for the fact that you're eliminating some of the box. As we all know, that's not really a logical step. I started with these little, it was a Goldwood coaxial, has the built-in tweeter in it, and my thought process, well, I might be able to do a little bit less on that with the fact that the high end is covered. Did the L-shaped box design, did round off the back of all the openings. I did learn some of the things you do's and don'ts and all that stuff. I put a little baffle step circuit on this, which I later found out that with this coaxial setup, that's not really the issue. Probably disconnecting the tweeter and attenuating it that way would have been a better choice. But it turned out okay. I got a decent sounds and got some decent recordings out of it with some heavy equalization. So not pleased overall, but I thought for the money, for 120 bucks for the pair, I was okay. This next one went through 2 renditions, and that's why it's naked now, because I've kind of stripped it twice here. I've got a little fancier. It's hard to tell, but I V'd out the sides a little bit, about 10 degrees, a little bit harder to glue up and clamp up when you do that. Again, reinforced it a little bit more. Started with a monoprice ceiling speaker here, and you can't really see that too well, but I had a circle opening here, had its own built-in grill, had attenuation for the coaxial tweeter that was in the center, and so I figured I'd have a tweeter mid-range around it and do a cheap bass woofer down here and have a 3-way design. Sounded god-awful, and even with the attenuating the tweeter and adding some more crossover, I mean, I ended up doing a lot of crossover parts in there, still was not pleased with it. So I really junked the monoprice top half totally and found a substitute here. The substitute was these slim magnaplanar tweeter / mid-ranges, and I got those in and first installed them in this. I rear mounted them, beveled the edge here. I know it makes it a little bit of a horn-like loading here, hoping that I could get a little bit more smoother response with it. And similar issues. This planer is a lot more efficient than any woofer that I put in the bottom. So even with an L pad, I couldn't get it tamed enough. I think some of the issues with this horn loading of it also factored into it, and so I junked it. So I'm going to probably reassess these cabinets later on and see if I can't get something to work, but still a L design and maybe usable for some future project. About a year passes, and I get to my next brainstorm, and it is, I call it my T.O.A.H, which is a Tux On A Hobo. Here's the hobo side of my good old pine plywood, which I do really well. And the Tux side is these planers that I'm quite proud of. Those things actually play really well. I did a little bit of rear wave dampening on them, some cabinet dampening on the bass parts here, and tried. It is definitely a true kind of open baffle, U-shaped baffle on the bass here, which I know is a little problematic too. But overall, I was really struck by my original test of these, and I'll give you more details in a second. Budget-wise, again, I stayed on budget for the most part, except with the crossover. Roughly $90 in drivers per tower. Crossover, when I started early on, I knew I was going to have to do a high pass and a low pass. and I wasn't sure from there where else I was gonna have to go. But I ended up putting more in, definitely in the treble circuit than I was anticipating, and so I'm $100+ on the crossover alone, but close to budget. So roughly $420 for the pair, not counting the wood. And I'm happy to say the wood was pretty cheap. A sheet of pine and some leftover, I think maple plywood is what I used for the tops here. So budget, like I said, still definitely in the budget category. Crossovers, I went and I did trial and error of about probably 2 or 3 dozen different setups here. I modeled them on XM. I tested by ear for lots of it, and my ear and XM and things in between and testing all were not really agreeing on what we liked. I ended up with a first order on the woofers, and then a second order high pass on the upper driver, and then I also included an L pad to knock down the efficiency of this thing, because it's still, even as with 2 large woofers here, this thing is still louder than everything in the system there. And then even without any treatment or filters on this top planer, it's still got a rise between 10 and 20K that's pretty noticeable. And so I put a little notch filter right at the end of the circuit there to kind of knock down that upper end. And so I'll try and put the REW measurement and what I ended up getting in room. And I have a slight little downward slope going down about 4 dB from the base down up to the highest levels, which is what I like. I don't like a real hot high end, and these are definitely pushing it a little bit. But crossover, like I said, got more involved. I've got over $100 worth in the crossover per speaker alone. Soundstage and imaging with these was pretty good overall. I was satisfied, knowing that the planer has some issues with vertical off axis. They presented a really good center image when faced forward. I did both tilting the tops in and out, and even and further out, and found just facing them straight forward when they're placed about 8 feet apart from each other, still got a really good center image, and sounded great. The sound stage, I could pinpoint different instruments coming from different areas. Horizontal off-axis was actually very good, maybe 30 to 40 degrees. And then the vertical off-axis, again, is limited to what these planers can do. I would say that's more like 10 or 15 degrees. You got to really keep these planers at ear level or close to it there. I made this also to where, just to keep the voice coils lined up, I could slide this top unit forward and backwards a little bit, and help with alignment too. But overall, happy with just both soundstage and imaging. On that same note, SPLs and dynamics. These things are probably the most chest thumping speakers I've ever owned. They really put a kick in the room when you're listening, whether you're listening to classical, jazz, rock, pop, you name it, heavy bass material and stuff. These things got a thump in your chest. That 40 to 60 hertz range, what I call kick drum range and upper bass range, these things are just visceral with how they hit you in the chest. I was listening. That's a pretty loud volume. It was louder than I would ever normally listen. And these things never distorted. They never started showing noise or mechanical issues. Even using my Integra receiver, topping amp, and my little IEMA, which I'm going to brag on in a little bit, that these things really fill up a space and kind of give you that live performance kind of impact. I even set them up at the edge of my garage, and almost like a block party kind of setup. They were surprising with a room behind them and a wall kind of to the rear. They threw out some sound with just a little 50-watt amp here that was shocking there. So really impressed with that side of things. biggest differences between the T.O.A.Hs and most of my other box speakers is timbre and tone. That's the big thing. Even though my modeling showed a really good frequency response, my measurements showed a good frequency response. Tone and timbre, to my ear, is where these are the weakest here, especially in that male voice and cello range. I think the woofers are trying to play a little bit too high, and that's out of their comfort zone. I think if you use these woofers yourself, they need to be rolled off much lower. 200 hertz or lower is my guess here, and I got these playing a little bit higher than they should. When I tried a second order and a fourth order low pass filter on them, it lost too much sound for the whole system here. So I ended up just going back to a single order crossover. But tone and timbre, although the frequency response looks good, is nowhere near the quality of natural and neutral sound that I get from the CSS audio. So just that's the weakness that I wish I had more mastery to be able to fix. The biggest thing probably is design flaws and woofer choices and all that. But that's the thing that probably bugs me the most. So how do they perform against my reference here? And the answer is not that close in a lot of areas here. Where they probably went out, like I said earlier, is SPLs and dynamics and just room filling music. They definitely have a unique way of filling a room. I don't have a lot of room treatment out here. Normally I have bass traps here and over in the corner, and I didn't have those for the recording there. But these guys definitely can fill a space and give you some decent quality sounds. But I have to brag on the CSS audio folks. The deeper bass extension, much clearer and cleaner in that critical range of voices, and I just these are my top tier right now, what I've got in my system here. Of course, they're 3 times as much as what I spent on these, so I can't knock them too much, but I do appreciate what the T.O.A.Hs are doing. And I've made it to where it's modular, so I can disconnect this, and I can I've got the crossover separated, so I can try a different head unit with these later on, and maybe use the bass in a different way. So I think I got a future for them, and it's definitely a step in a better direction on some of my open Baffle projects. And I will close out with a couple little demos like I normally do. I know it only gives you a little taste of it there, but I hope you enjoy, and I've enjoyed the journey here.